You probably shouldn't worry about it. There are people whose full-time jobs it is to monitor dams like these. This is Lock-in Dam number 1, and I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But, and this is a big but, it actually depends upon the type of dam. This is a buttress dam, and the risk profile of the individual dam. There is a list of over 90,000 different dams in the National Inventory of Dams that you can look at online and look up the specific risk profile of a specific dam. There have been incidents of dams that have actually catastrophically failed in recent memory, the most recent of which was in 2017. The Oroville spillway in California had a massive problem.
The hole beneath that flow is sending water over the edge and taking much of the surrounding terrain with it. The Lake Oroville spillway has not had a catastrophic failure.
So the question isn't simply, should I worry? Should I worry about this dam collapsing? The question is, will this dam collapse? How do I know with a degree of certainty that this dam will collapse or not? Let's look at some examples of some of the ways that dams can collapse and break it down piece by piece. There's overtopping, which is caused by water coming over the top of the dam. More water than you want coming over the top of the dam, obviously. There's also foundation defects, something wrong fundamentally with the foundation of the dam itself. This dam, again, was built about 100 years ago. It was renovated about 50 or 40 years ago. There's also inadequate maintenance or upkeep. This specific dam is owned by a $30 billion renewable energy company that owns all sorts of stuff worldwide. There's also cracking. Cracking can be caused by earthquakes, shifts in the sediment, things like that. But again, you're not interested in knowing about just the possible ways that this dam could collapse. You are interested in knowing, is there a way to tell whether this dam will collapse? So this dam is actually operated by Brookfield Energy, which is a $30 billion publicly listed energy company. So the body that regulates energy, since this is a hydro dam, is the National Energy Regulatory Commission. The National Regulatory Energy Commission comes up with all sorts of documents and working groups on predicting how and the mechanisms by which dams can fail. But as I've been talking about through this whole video, how do we actually predict whether this dam will fail? How do we make a clear and concise prediction? Well, for that, we have to look at what is an actual prediction itself. What does it mean to predict something? So first off, a prediction is something that has something concrete. It's something that you can pull out of physical reality. It has to have a time, a measurement, mass, weight, luminance or radiance level, something that you can actually measure and derive a physical scientific property off of that. Secondly, a prediction is something that is applied to a test or a trial of some time, which has a binary outcome. It's either this way or that way. Thirdly, predictions must be novel, and this is very important. This is something that I think gets mixed up a lot. What does it mean to be novel? Novel means the prediction itself or the math behind the prediction can't know the answers to the test before it takes the test. Novel. It has to be blind, kind of in a way that justice is blind. You can't fit the test to the answers. You have to be able to look at many different trials over time, and based upon those past trials, you have to be able to create a novel prediction. You can't just take all of the answers ahead of time and look at how the dam may have collapsed and then said, well, it was because of this reason. That's not a prediction. It's not a novel prediction. It has to be a novel prediction to be useful, because we want to be able to know whether this dam is going to actually collapse. So a prediction is different than what I would term for this video an accommodation. An accommodation is something where it's designed to be right no matter what the outcome is. An accommodation is something that basically you could say, well, gee, that dam looks pretty solid. Yeah, I don't think it's going to collapse. That has no basis in any sort of measurement. It has no mathematical model attached to it. It's basically just me kind of BSing and saying what I think. And let's say the dam did collapse, even though I said that. Well, I could say, well, part of the dam is still there. Part of it, so it didn't actually collapse after all. I was right the whole time. An accommodation is designed to allow the maker of the accommodation to be right no matter the outcome. So while predictions are useful for keeping people safe or predicting the future, basically for knowing really important things, an accommodation is useful for keeping the maker of the accommodation safe or making the maker of the accommodation money. Sure. It's not to be used in something as important as ensuring that we know whether a dam is going to collapse, whether we need to evacuate the surrounding area. So knowing the difference between an accommodation and a prediction is all well and good. It sounds great, but that still doesn't answer our question. Will this dam collapse? You still want to know, will this dam collapse? Well, that brings us back to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They created a report called Engineering Guidelines and Risk-Informed Decision Making, in which they talk about dam prediction models. So I'll show some of the models that they've shown here on the screen. Really, the simpler way to look at it, rather than looking at the math, is to just think of a box, and you have some inputs to the box and you have some outputs. The inputs are all sorts of physical measurements that they can take about the dam, whether it's a person, a qualified geologist presumably, or some sort of mechanism. Maybe they're looking at the flow rate and they're measuring it with some kind of electrical sensor that measures the flow rate. They're taking those as inputs and they are outputting what is the danger, what is the risk of this dam collapsing. And now there are many different types of boxes that you can create and have them all work together to form a better prediction. So what they've done with some of these boxes, some of these predictions, is they've compiled them together and they put them into different types of software, one of which is called WinDam. It actually looks like an old school Windows software, like from the early 2000s. I think that's probably when it was created. So that brings us back again to our original question, will this dam collapse? Well, what we're left with are essentially subject matter experts who are left to do some of the boring work of creating these models, creating these boxes, making sure that they are novel predictions, that these are predictions that are based upon past data, but have actually useful information that can be used to tell whether the dam will or will not collapse or breach in the future. And they monitor and they watch and they measure the dam over time. And that's about it. It leaves the rest of us basically just not worrying about it, not really thinking about it. It's kind of weird because you'd think that something as important or huge as a dam collapsing would be something that we worry about all the time or we pay a lot of attention to. But it just kind of works. It just sort of sits there for years and years and years. And we just know that there are people who are doing a reasonably good job, at least we think, watching these things in some form, creating predictions. I guess that really is a testament to the power of a prediction versus an accommodation. An accommodation, it's something that we use a lot more than a prediction. A prediction is a lot more expensive, but when it's something that there are a lot of really bad consequences if it happens, you pay for the prediction.